Back in 2012 I published my first book, Hope Won't Pay the Wages. It's a very specialist book designed at helping business owners deal with the traumatic stress of losing a business. And it's based on interviews that I conducted with business owners that had been through a corporate insolvency. And from that I've distilled the learnings plus my own experiences to be able to give tools and resources to anybody going through the curve of losing a business. But what's interesting is that I asked every business owner at the end what their definition of success was, and in every single case they all said that it had changed. Prior to the insolvency, it had all been about big houses, fast cars, good looking suits, that sort of thing. But since they'd been through what they'd been through, they'd realised that it's so much more important to life, to business. There's something deeper, and that ultimately the whole point of being in business is to enjoy yourself. Now what's interesting is that as I went out into the wider business world and started networking and meeting people, I met people in all sorts of situations, some in difficulties, some doing well, some doing really well. But the common thread that came through just about everybody was nobody was really enjoying what they were doing. That everybody was moaning and complaining about something. And I thought, if you're running your own business, you set the rules. If you're not enjoying what you do, then what's the point? I started trying to explore what was required in order to be able to enjoy what you do. First of all, we need to understand what we mean by enjoyment. You see, I don't think it is the same as happiness. We often use the word interchangeably, but we're constantly being asked to read books about how to feel happy now or fill in happiness surveys so that we know where we are on the happiness measure. The thing is, happiness is a very short-term situation. Things can be going bad and then suddenly we're happy when something funny happens or we go and see something amusing. Conversely, we can be top of the world, everything's absolutely going great, and then something serious happens, like somebody close to us dies, boom, and we're sad. That doesn't reflect the overall situation. So I think there's a distinct difference between enjoyment and happiness. And my analogy runs like this. Happiness is like the weather. Enjoyment is like the climate. When you're living in a sunny climate, then you get more sunny days, but it's not impossible to have rain, even snow. Similarly, if you're having an enjoyable life, that doesn't mean you can't be sad or miserable at any moment in time, but on average, you are in a better position and a happier situation as you go through life. And then a couple of years ago, I attended an event where I was reintroduced to a model that I'd learnt years ago during my accountancy training. And that model is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Some of you may be familiar with it already, but have you really explored how it actually works? In that workshop, I was pointed in the direction of a book. It's called Peak by Chip Connolly, an American entrepreneur who ran a series of high-level hotels in America. And he explains how he used Maslow's hierarchy of needs to get the best out of his clients, his team, even stakeholders. And we applied in so many different ways. I'll be honest, actually, that book's not that good. I got bored with it quite quickly. But the models and the ideas and the concepts that came out of it were what helped me to develop a model for business enjoyment, because I realised that it fitted what we do at every stage of our business career. And when we get the model right, then we can get enjoyment out of what's going on. And what I want to do is just explain to you what that model is if you're not familiar with it, but how it fits into the concept of business enjoyment. Maslow was a social scientist back in the early part of the 20th century, and he pulled together this model to explain what stages each person needed to have in order to be able to be happy. If anything was missing, then that's where their default would run to. So let me just go through each step to explain what those things are. Now, in Maslow's model, he actually uses a pyramid. So the first level is need to have in place before you can move on to the second, move on to the third. Just because I'm standing here looking at camera, it's a bit hard for me to correct that pyramid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some icons to represent each stage. And so those will be the things that we can use as memory hooks for the different stages of the model. The full Maslow model actually has 6 levels. I'm going to condense that down to 4 just to make things a bit simpler. The first level is safety. Where's our next meal coming from? Have we got a roof over our head? It's often said that the human race is only 3 meals away from anarchy. Let's face facts, if you're starving, then everyone else can go to hell. And my representation of safety is something that's got its own house on his back, and he doesn't eat that much, so the food issue is not a great one. And it is, of course, a tortoise, or turtle, depending on your preference. Now, in business terms, this means we need to have a reliable, consistent business that's bringing enough money in to cover our bills. Doesn't need to worry about any more than that, but we just know that we're safe from a day-to-day basis. You'll notice that most sales tactics are built around this area. Get more sales, get more profits, make sure you get more money, all targeting our primal instinct for safety and security. There's also a subsection of this in terms of our health. So if we're running around like a lunatic and putting stuff in our bodies, or getting overweight, or running stressful, then that's going to start affecting our health, and this comes in at this prime level. But that's level 1, is safety. The next level is belonging. Once we've got our food and our shelter sorted out, we want to be part of something. We're very tribal creatures as human beings, and we just witness what happens in a sporting event. And my representation of belonging is something which is consistently seen going around with packs of its similar nature, and that is, of course, the penguin. Now, in business terms, this means we want to be working with the right kind of clients. We want to be working with a team that gets us. We want to be suppliers that are in the same sort of concepts and values that we believe in. And whilst that seems quite straightforward, to be able to do that, what that actually means is we've got to understand ourselves as well. We've got to be prepared to be a little more vulnerable and open ourselves up, because if we pretend to be someone in the world that we're not, then we're going to end up in the wrong tribe. So actually, getting through to your right tribe can actually be quite difficult and challenging for most people. So that's the second level, belonging. The third level is esteem, external and internal. So people on the outside say we're looking good, but we feel good within the inside. And of course, there's no better animal to represent the concept of looking amazing and feeling amazing than the magnificent African lion. Fortunately, I didn't have a lion toy, so I'm going to have to make do with this instead. Nevertheless, cats have a pretty good idea on whether they look good or not. But in business terms, again, external esteem, that's getting good reviews, good testimonials, getting repeat business, getting more work, all that sort of thing, and doing well. But internal esteem is also important for a company in itself, so that the whole team know that they're part of something that is making a difference, and they understand and trust themselves. But also as a business owner, do you actually feel worthy enough to have the success that you have? Do you actually enjoy what you do on a day-to-day basis? And there's a lot of people out there that can have very successful businesses but don't feel like they're worthy of it or deserve it. And this can have a massive impact on their stress levels. So that's level 3, that's your esteem. Now, those 3 levels are kind of the what I would call the hygiene levels, things that we need to have in place in order to be able to enjoy what we do. When we have a problem, then it's normally something tapping into one of those levels that's causing a problem. But having those 3 in full working order by themselves isn't enough. There's another layer, the pinnacle of the pyramid, which we need to bring into account. Now, this is slightly different. We can get by without this, but finding it is what makes all the difference. And when we do get there, this will give us everything we want from our business. Now, Maslow called it self-actualization. What the hell does that mean? So I prefer to use a different concept and the underlying meaning of what he's trying to get at. And that is a sense of purpose. Why do you do what you do? Now, my representation of this is not that obvious when you first see it, but I'll explain later as to why I've used this as an image. And it's a killer whale. Now, you could say that a killer whale is self-actualized because it killed things and its name is killer whale, but that's not really where we're going with this. But I will explain more about this later on. But in business terms, this is fundamental, because if we can match what we do on a day-to-day basis and connect it with something which is meaningful to us, then it has a completely different outlook on the way our business runs. What's important, by the way, is when we talk about purpose, we don't want our purpose to be something along the lines of getting myself a bigger car or bigger house. It needs to be something beyond us, above us, for the benefit of somebody else. So it might be we have a purpose which realises that the local area becomes better as a result, or the people that we're helping are in a better position, but we can connect what we do with something which is above and beyond ourselves. Now, what's interesting is when we can find that purpose, which tends to be connected with one of the other 3 levels, by the way, there'll be something within our psyche which really gets us riled. When one of those things is triggered, will be connected to our purpose in some way. But when we can find that purpose, here's what's happened. we become much more motivated to pursue it. We get much more, find it much easier to get into flow and get into the zone. And when we are completely focused and pushing on something that is our purpose, then there is a consequence of that. We end up enjoying ourselves. It's interesting, enjoyment is not something you can target as of itself. Have you ever seen an advert for a party which says, come along, we're going to have a good time, it's going to be fun? Well, you know damn well that any fun that comes out of that party is just a lucky coincidence rather than actually anything that's been planned. And it's the same with enjoyment. It's not something we can actually pursue within itself. We need to target ourselves on something that is meaningful and important to us, and enjoyment comes as a consequence. Now, a lot of people draw meaning from their children. They do what they do because they want their kids to have a better life. And that leads us to a very interesting concept. Human beings are unusual in that they live much longer than their ability to have kids. In other words, if you look at the other species in the world, including the great apes, when the female gets to a point where it can't have kids anymore, then their lifespan tails off incredibly quickly. Whereas with humans, we live to being 70, 80, 90, even 100. And in the tribal days, that would have been really useful to have more people available to help with the children, to free up the younger adults to go and do the hunting and gathering that was needed to keep the tribe safe. Nevertheless, that does pose a problem. If children is your purpose in life and why you do what you do, what happens when the children leave home, when you're no longer responsible for them? What happens then? And it's quite common for mothers to get to a certain point where they lose focus because they don't know what their position is in the world, and we've got to rediscover what their meaning and purpose is. Similarly, those people that don't have kids at all, like myself, what's our purpose when kids are not the factor? As I say, humans are unusual in this situation. In fact, they're one of only 3 species that they've so far found in the animal kingdom that have this trait of living much longer. And the other 2 are the pilot whale and, of course, the killer whale. I have absolutely no idea why these 2 particular species should follow our path, or the other way around, but for some reason these are the only ones they found so far. And that's the reason that I use the killer whale as the symbol for purpose. In a business sense, if we can find our purpose, then we're able to communicate that to other people, which will attract in those people that are bought in and agree with what we're trying to do. It's going to make it easier to recruit, it's going to make it easier to win customers, and it's going to get better deals with suppliers because they believe in the ethos, not necessarily in the fundamental elements of making money. This means you can actually be more successful than a company that doesn't have the sense of purpose. But ultimately for me, it's that byproduct of being able to enjoy what you do by focusing on something that means something to you that I think is particularly attractive. And that's why it's the most fundamental thing for me to try and find in any business owner is, why do you do what you do and what is your purpose in life? Trouble is, of course, it's not like a case of just clicking the fingers and finding it. It can take a lot of work, and some people never do. As I say, you can still have a pretty happy life without having found the purpose. But for me, that's the icing on the cake that really makes a big difference in business people today. I spent the last few years trying to work out what my purpose is and what's important to me. I've always known roughly what I wanted to do, but never really had an emotional connection to it until now. One of the things I did was to sit down and think, what difference do I actually make to the clients I work with? And after a while I realised that I wasn't helping them necessarily to grow their business and make more money, although that was sometimes a consequence. What I actually did was take somebody who was unhappy and help them enjoy life again. And that's where my concept for business enjoyment came from. And then I realised that actually through my background that this was a message that ran all the way through. If you think about it, I used to work with business owners that had lost everything through my insolvency. They were watching everything they had built collapse in front of their eyes, and you truly got to understand the emotional connection there is between a business owner and the business itself. And then I ended up realising I didn't want to be in that job anymore. Nothing to do with the company or the job that I did, it's just I was in the wrong place. And after a while I became to resent it until actually I was hating going into work every day. I was miserable. In fact, I would actually feel physically sick going into work in the car every morning. Since then I've met millionaires who've got everything they could ever want, and yet they're still suffering from stress and depression because they're worried about losing it all. This is not what life is about. On the flip side, I've met people who've got nothing, not a bean to their name, and they are as happy as the day is long. Something somewhere is out of balance. And I see it as my job to help everybody find the enjoyment that they should be getting out of their successful businesses. My mission is to start a movement so that people are talking about enjoyment as being the key measure of success in business, not just sales and profit. This movement will develop out of the business enjoyment community that you can be a part of. A community of people who want to be able to have a successful business and enjoy life at the same time. If you want to know more, then go to the community pages of my website at www.businessenjoyment.com. Take a particular look at the breathing spaces, monthly meetings where people come together to talk about the key themes that I talk about in the business enjoyment model. Before I go, I want to leave you one last thing, and that's the derivation of the word enjoyment. Now these days, enjoyment means to get joy from something, but its old meaning comes from Old French, en joie, and its original meaning was to give joy to. So go out there, enjoy life, and make a difference.